So I've been playing The Last of Us 2. Horrible, I know. I'm live streaming it. It's painful, but we're managing to push through. And already I noticed something very interesting about the philosophy. Because it's really interesting to play video games that are made by social justice activists, and Drachman is a self-proclaimed social justice activist, because they get to be gods. They get to be the god of their own little universe. And everything they create is like the type of world that is reflective of their politics, of what constitutes as a good and a bad society. And I think like this is very interesting to experience how social justice activists would view a perfect world. And I think the first town where you start off, where Joel exists and the rest of the characters begin, that is the perfect town. That is like the safe haven. That is the utopia. And within the utopia, we notice how the main character, Ellie, kisses another girl. And we find out that someone called her a mean word. Now, we don't get told what the word is, but we can assume it's a slur. And as consequences of that, Joel punches the guy out. So for the guy saying words, he is beaten to the point of unconsciousness by Joel. And then we're treated to this scene.
Hey. Look, last night I was drinking too much.
Sure.
I'm trying to say I'm sorry. Maria tells me that you and Dean are headed out. I made you some sandwiches.
Okay.
Or steak.
Thank you, Seth.
Yeah. Well, you be safe out there.
Yep. I appreciate that.
What you got there?
Biggot Sandwiches.
Smells good. You sure?
It's fine. Let me walk you out.
Okay.
Alright, so cringy dialogue aside, this is the morality that we notice coming from California now. And it's the morality that I notice journalists are pushing. And it's no wonder that video game journalists are masturbating over this game, because this is their preaching. They're actually preaching to how people should act. So what do we notice here? Well, we notice a guy, an elderly man, which has the wrong attitude. Okay, he calls Ellie a slur. And his punishment is to get violently beaten by another member of the community. And the member of the community that beats him doesn't have anything negative happen to him. Like he's not getting a wording, he's not getting a fine. Like violence and assault is perfectly justifiable for insults. I mean, look, if I were to go in a place, let's say in a community, and I call someone a son of a bitch, normally, like in a civilized place, I would be escorted out. You do not have to get violent to someone. Like, violence would be the last resort. You would not go to violence for just one offense. Like, that is escalating it way too far. Like, there are other steps you can take until escalating it to that point. You can insult that person back. You can ask the person to leave. You can warn that person not to do it again. And if like that person is a troublemaker and keeps doing it, then you rough him up. But like, it's still like if you rough him up and they resist, then you knock them out. Like there are steps for civilized human beings to resolve an issue without having to go through violence. Like, violence is the last step. But in the perfect world of Neil Druckmann, it's not only that violence is acceptable, but it's also not enough. The leader of the community which apparently doesn't have any other things to do, forces the guy to apologize. So now there is like pressure, not from the community itself, like from the other members, no, from the leaders, from the top up. It's like it's imposed top down in order for the person to apologize. And the person does seem genuine in its apology. Like he could just say he's sorry, but no, like he actually makes them some sandwiches. And the apology is not accepted. And it's quite funny because the person is considered to be the bigot. However, the bigot actually changes his mind. He's like, you know what, I was wrong, you're right, here you go, here's some sandwiches, good luck in your journey. And the person that got offended, who thinks the guy is a bigot, even after apologizing, is still pissed off and still doesn't want to interact with that person and doesn't accept the apology. Who's the bigot here? Like, who's the better man? Like, I know that when I was a kid and I would do something wrong, my mother would force me to apologize, right? And I would apologize. But sometimes it would happen that someone else would do something wrong to me. And that person would apologize. And my mom would force me to accept the apology if she thought it's sincere. Because, like, that's how normal humans act. Like, you do something that you realize it's bad, and you apologize, and the apology is supposed to mean that you feel bad and it will never happen again. Like, most people are supposed to accept the first time a person apologizes, and if it happens again, then they don't accept it. But with social justice mentality, it's one strike, you're out forever. There is no redemption. There is no apology. There is no trying to change the person. Like, the person is now an utter evil. He is like a malevolent force that needs to be ostracized from the community. At least in this game, it's not being pointed as such, but it's still pointed like, no, like nothing that person will do is going to make Ellie change her mind about him. Okay? Now, what I find very interesting is that later on into the game, you find a couple of soldiers from Fedra. And there is graffiti written on the wall saying, fuck Fedra. And Ellie points out how the soldiers were so cruel that anyone that was caught writing that with graffiti on a wall would get beaten. And she finds like, she's abhorred by the soldiers, and it's like, how can you beat someone for spraying graffiti on a wall? But at the beginning of the game, someone got beaten up for calling Ellie a naughty word. So it's like, it's not like they're against violence. It's not like they're like, okay, violence for speaking out is wrong. No. They're okay with punching people and knocking them unconscious for being on a wrong opinion. It's just like their ideology gets to be enforced with violence. And when other people do it for their ideology, it's like, oh my God, they're savages. And finally, the thing that really annoyed me with all of this, we're talking about the zombie apocalypse. It looks pretty bad. It looks like the majority of the population have been wiped out. Is there nothing else to do than to focus on this little high school drama, like someone calls someone else a word and now they're being punched and they're forced to... Do they really have time for this nonsense? Like, the leader of that community has nothing better to do than to intervene in this personal matter. I mean, honestly, like, the person would probably not care that there's two lesbians in there. Like, in fact, he would probably be happy because it's like, well, less children, one less mouth to feed. Like, the community doesn't need more children. Seriously, think about it. Like, if you're in a zombie environment where noises attract zombies and whatnot, a child is a liability. You would want to keep the community as small as possible in order not to attract zombies and not to attract other forces and whatnot. So kids would be a liability. Like, if anything, they would encourage more gay people. They would encourage more lesbians, Yeah, so it's like these types of things that do not really fit in the game. Like, there's another part where she goes into a music store, and again, like, she's outside of any civilized place. Like, there's no walls, there's nothing. And she just picks up guitar and starts singing. It's like, aren't there clickers around that use echolocation in order to find out where you are? What are you doing? You're breaking the immersion. Like, when you traveled outside of the city in the first Last of Us, it looked like a dangerous, hostile, and really bad place. Nowadays, apparently you can just go and pick a guitar and ding, 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 and it's like, what? Yeah, no, it's really annoying that people say, oh, this just has to do with like being lesbians in the game. It's like, yeah, like this is the same go-to criticism that they always have. Like they create a horrible game, they add some lesbians in it, and then they hide behind the lesbian skirts to pretend that they're the only reason people don't like the game is because there's lesbians. Look, people like Mass Effect, there were lesbians in that. People like Dragon Age, there were lesbians in that. People like anime, like Attack on Titan, guess what? There are lesbians in that. Maybe it's not the lesbians. Maybe, just maybe, it's got nothing to do with the lesbians, and it has to do with the cringy dialogue, with the fact that these two characters act like 14-year-old kids, boys. No, they act like 14-year-old boys. These are the types of conversations and banter and jokes and cursing at every 2 steps of the way that I used to have in high school as a kid. And other girls would not want to hang around with us because they considered us to be immature. And no shit. Yeah, we were immature. It's like, the reason we were cursing so much, it's because it was edgy. It's like, oh, the parents aren't there, so we can curse. And other girls didn't want to have anything to do with us because they transcended that. It's like they didn't feel the need to have a potty mouth. These 2 girls, like every single time they make a step, it's like they drop an F-bomb or they drop something. I'm not against cursing, by the way. I'm not against cursing, but adults do not curse like this. If you curse when the situation demands it, or you curse for comedic effect, that is one thing. But like these characters just curse for the sake of it, to act mature and whatnot. It's not my type of game. Let me put it like this. Like I am not enjoying the dialogue in this game. It's as if teenagers have wrote it. And then you have like the whole coincidences. Like the coincidences, I hate it. When progressives make movies or video games, everything has to rely on coincidence. Like you're walking with your horse, and all of a sudden, you step on a landmine. Like what? Why was the landmine even there? What? So you step on a landmine, and they capture you, but they don't capture Dina, which was like literally right next to you. And I was like, okay, so Dina is going to be the one that saves me. And then you have like 2 people, one puts a knife at your throat, ready to kill you, and then another guy comes in, stops the guy from killing you, then picks up a gun in order to shoot you. It's like, why didn't you let the guy with the knife then? And the guy with the knife then tries to stop the guy from shooting you. It's like, what the fuck? And then Dina comes from the glass ceiling from above, which was left unguarded, and she shoots the guy, she falls through the ceiling, and then the other guy, which manages to remain alive, instead of just shooting Dina, he goes to choke her and strangle her while you free yourself and shoot the guy. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, how is this good writing? How is this? I see Eric Kane, the journalist, which I have respect for, on Twitter. You know, he writes for Forbes. And he doesn't understand what people have with this game. It's like, well, I'm sorry, man. Like, you either haven't played it or you're not being critical of it. It's like normal people outside California do not act like this. Is not how humans act. Okay, like if you want a story for adults, it has to have more consistency. It has to have the characters act like human beings. Another like, oh my god, like another thing. It's like they find this underground bunker. And they find like a jar of joints. No woman manages to open the jar. There was no man. If Joel was there, they would open the jar. See what I did? Oh, sexismus. But no, seriously, like they find some joints and they're acting like it's the most edgy thing. Like they're doing something illegal. Like, hello, civilization has collapsed. There are no laws against you smoking a joint. There's literally no reason why joints are illegal to begin with. Like, no one would care. Literally, no one would care. And they're like acting like they're so edgy. It's like, what are they doing? Like you're smoking a joint. Oh, look how edgy I am. Who wrote this game? Who made this? Who? And who expects $60 for this? Because that's the thing. You know, if this was for free, I wouldn't like, no, someone has the shame to ask me for my hard-earned money to pay for them for this. Like, I take food away from my table to pay for this. Jesus!